It is a Wednesday. Hello, Wednesday. Better Man Podcast viewers and listeners. We are ready to deal with some topics for men today. I'm ready to go on this Wednesday. Wednesdays are important to decide to get better because, man, you can really start to sink in the middle of the week. But if you stay focused on the things of God, if you stay focused on really improving as a man, you can make a difference even in the middle of the week. And that's why Wednesdays are considered one of the great days for men to get better by the Institute for Excellence in Men's Ability to be Great. They determined that this is 98% listened to by men. Wednesdays are 98% preferred by men to get better. So now you're tuned in and you're one of those that are deciding to improve. We're going to talk about communication as a man. Let me just say, if you are listening to this and you could hit the like button on wherever you're listening, heart button, hit the subscribe button on YouTube. That always helps us as well. And then any comments you want to share, you must understand that any little engagement affects our algorithm. So if you are able to do that, you can get this information into other guys' hands just by being a participant that way. I don't make any money. This is a non-monetization platform, so it's just done to try to help other men. Now, as we go through this together, let me just say, as we lay out the foundation that I want to talk about today, communication. I've talked about how we struggle in communication with our spouses, and this is a problem. I want to just share with you a little bit more as to why we don't communicate well, because I'm not going to just talk to you about spouses, and I'm not going to talk to you about just relationships with loved ones. I want to talk to you about just communication in general, because if you go into the workforce, if you engage with other coworkers, I'm talking about through communication, of course, in marriage, in relationship. So the people who struggle with communication the most are men. I think in general, we have a culture coming up of kids that are, being raised up and to go into the workforce, and they have not been taught communication very well. And so they do a poor job at it in general. I think men have something kind of built into their DNA that doesn't allow them to communicate as well, maybe, potentially. I do not stand before or sit here before you doing this podcast as somebody who's some sort of great communicator when it comes to bringing everybody into the same realm. I fail all the time at this. I've been on a journey to get better at it, but man, it is a struggle for me, just as a dude in general. But I think we have to grow up in homes where we're taught things, right? That's why we do this podcast. And if you're not taught in your early years how to communicate as a man, you miss this, right? I mean, and so many people are taught basics of life, maybe not even that anymore. But nobody is intentionally trying to get together, raising our children and say, hey, let's teach them how to be communicators. All right? And so they go into the workforce and they don't communicate. There's gaps in what they're trying to accomplish. They're trying to build a team. They don't know how to communicate to a team. They can't even communicate properly to their boss, very specific, basic things, a week in advance, a month in advance. They can't communicate how they're doing at their job, performance skills, it's just not there. And for somebody who employs people like myself, it's like pulling teeth sometimes amongst younger men, but also younger generation in general. But as we do a podcast for men, okay, I want to just kind of share with you some of the challenges that you and I have as men and how we have to overcome these so that we can be better communicators. And so here's just some of the things that, I put down. Number one, as a man, it's not seemingly inherent in the way we're wired to communicate. Like, the data tells us that women talk more than men. Not always, but generally speaking, they like to converse and communicate more than men. We have this sort of instinctive nature, maybe it's just hunting and gathering. It sounds kind of simple, but just taking it back to raw, we go out, we get things done, we come home. It just seems to be built into us. Woman nurtures, cares, has these sort of traits inside of her, and she likes to, as a part of that, talk and converse more. I don't understand it all, but the science tells us that men speak thousands of words less, it seems, in a day than a man does, or something like that. I think I shared it on the podcast once. So I think we just have this inherent thing where we don't like to talk, but it can't be something that we just sit in. We have to learn as men to communicate better. I'm not saying as a man to learn to communicate maybe like as a woman. You're not a woman. But, like if we're merging in this world that we live in our relationships to do better, we have to decide in a marriage to do better. We don't just say, oh, I suck at communication, and so therefore we're just going to have sucky communication forever in the marriage. No, you do your part. She does her part to understand how you communicate, and we mesh that together. There always will be challenges, but we don't just sit there as a man and say, oh, duh, I just can never communicate. No, we're going to do our part. So we have to push past, it seems like, some of the wiring that we do have. You don't go into your job and say, well, I guess I'll just suck at communication. This is happening in 2 weeks at my job, and I'm going to accomplish it. I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm not going to build a team. I'm not going to communicate all details to my coworker, to my boss, to my customers. I'm just going to, just hope it all works out. No, that's sucky. You don't want to do that. We have to decide to be a communicator. So you have to, I think, as a man, push through this and learn how to develop this trait. For not just your job, but of course in relationships as well. I think the second thing that makes us problematic in our communication is because sometimes when we grew up, we talked and tried to communicate and we were rejected. We said things that people said were stupid. Maybe we had a father that didn't validate our words. Maybe we had people push back, call us dorky, stupid. I don't know what it looks like, but it happens. And sometimes you're just told to shut up by the way people respond to you. And you have to be able to push past that, right? That's a fear. And you have to push past your fears. You've been rejected by your words, It starts at a young age. You asked a girl out, you wrote her a note, and she told you you were dumb looking and stupid and rejected you, and now you just shut your mouth. I know that's oversimplifying it, but it is true that if you speak and people reject you, you shut up more. You go to your workplace and you suggest a great creative idea, and they tell you, no, we're never doing that. It just encourages you to keep your mouth closed and don't ever talk again. And we have to see that those things have happened, but we don't live in them. We push past to become a better communicator. I think we struggle at communicating as men because we just don't listen well. We are on our own agenda. We are on sometimes our own selfish routines. We're kind of going our own way, and we're just not good listeners. A woman will tell you he just doesn't listen, and she's probably right. So again, we don't just sit there. We say, how do I get better? We work at our listening skills. 2 ears, 1 mouth, 2 ears to listen more than we talk. And you've got to figure out as a man how to listen better. I struggle. I want to listen to my spouse, and I do at times, but sometimes I don't. And then sometimes, my coworkers are speaking. I'm not listening to them well. I struggle with this, and so I've got to always be on this journey to try to be a better listener. Notice I said I want a journey to be better. I'm not just going to say I'm going to be an average dude, below average. I'm not going to be stagnant. I want to get better. And so you're making this choice to indeed get better. I think as men, we don't communicate well because we require specifics sometimes, like nuance and hints and things like that. We don't do well. And so we require bigger picture details sometimes to fully understand things. And so you got to go get the details, go get the information, take the information you learn, and then get it out there. I think one of the things that I've learned about disseminating information to others, just as a side note, is I have made an intention to write messages and notes to people who need to be included in conversations immediately when I know I need to. So, for example, not long before I recorded this podcast, before we set out to do this podcast, somebody wrote me about needing to do a wedding, and there was a lot of details to it. I immediately hung up the phone with that guy and typed out the details and sent it to my assistant So I'm expanding the level of communication immediately. I think we go on to the next thing as men. We compartmentalize, go on to the next thing, and we leave details in the cloud somewhere. It's like pulling them down. So if there's plans I want to do with our family that night, and maybe it includes my married daughter who lives, in another home now, my daughter and let's say her boyfriend or somebody, they all need to know. And so I take time to type out all the information, all the details right then and there. What I don't want to hear is, you didn't tell me, Dad. We didn't know that bit of information. So I give them the whole scope. And that's not in my nature, but I've just built habits to communicate more. You're at your job, and there's something that needs to be done in the next couple of weeks at your work. You're telling everybody in advance, sending out broad communication, including everybody on the message that you text, the email exchange, and you're putting everybody in on it because you want to get all the details of communication out to them. I think as men, we don't communicate well because we just like to be alone sometimes, and we got to push past that. You can't do life alone and expect it to be successful. You have got to push out of that loneliness and decide to communicate. And so we don't like to do any of this sometimes. As much as women, we don't like to be forced to talk. We don't like all that stuff, but we have to decide to do it. It is killing our performance at our jobs. It is killing our leadership. It is killing our relationships, our marriages. And so, guys, let's make a commitment to be better communicators, be better men by communicating better. God, thank you for giving us ears, mouths, brain, ability to write, text, talk, whatever it is, to share the things that are going on. And as men, we have to be leaders in communication. We cannot be the people who sit around blaming everybody else for why something didn't happen when we held the key to all the communication. God, help us to be better men in Jesus' name. Amen. See you on Friday.